Good evening and welcome to the November 25th, 2019 work session of the Mayor and City Council. Tonight we have 4 discussion topics. Before we get to them, it's my understanding that we need a motion to conduct a closed executive session after this meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Gaithersburg conduct a closed executive session tonight, Monday, November 25th, 2019, immediately following that session, pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Section 3-305B4, to consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state, and 3-305B7 to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. The topic to be discussed is the Lake Forest Mall property.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously, so we will be having a closed executive session after this meeting. Now we were going to go into the first of 4 committee briefings, the first from the Environmental Affairs Committee. And I'd like to turn it over to you guys.
Okay, thank you. I'm Doug Wolf, the chair of the committee, and with us this evening are committee members Paul Levinka and Jeanette Rosenbaum.
Welcome all, and thank you.
Thank you. So,
Go back. I haven't done it that one.
okay.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Jeanette Rosenbaum, the newest member of the Environmental Affairs Committee, and this is our annual briefing. As a quick recap, the mission of the Environmental Affairs Committee, or EAC, is to advise the Mayor and Council on environmental issues, promote environmental education and outreach activities, monitor county, state, and federal regulations for environmental impacts on city operations, explore new environmental initiatives, and support the city's Green Month celebration and programs related to green building, climate protection, pollution prevention, and watershed protection. Our mission supports the city's environment strategic direction to meet the needs of the city in a manner that accurately reflects the community's desire for environmental health and economic prosperity without compromising the ability of future generations to meet those same needs. We currently have 5 members, as well as our cohort of staff and council liaisons. Vice Chair Gruvunder resigned 2 weeks ago due to family obligations. And now I will turn it over to my more experienced colleagues.
All right. This has a P by it. That's me. So our priorities: community outreach. The committee seeks to educate Gaithersburg residents and students how to reduce their carbon footprint, practice organic lawn care, and keep our watershed healthy. It's a picture here from the Gaithersburg Green Up Day in 2019. One of the events that we believe helps to educate the community about taking care of watersheds. Community outreach. During Gaithersburg Green Month, which is during the month of April, the city invites residents to participate in activities that celebrate and improve the environment. In addition to being fun and educational, it is a great way for students to earn learning credits while making our community a better place to live. During the month, we also had this year Environmental Film Night, which featured a film, Potomac, The River Runs Through Us. The film highlighted that progress has been made in cleaning up visible pollution from our rivers, but now we aren't doing a good job of keeping newer, less visible pollutants out of rivers or out of our drinking water. The daily choices of individuals are contributing to this pollution, but we can all help protect our water by being more thoughtful about the products we use. We also highlight community members. I think most of you, or all of you, were attending the community recognition, the awards night. It was the 18th annual awards. Recognized individuals, businesses, schools, homeowner associations, nonprofits, scouting groups for their commitment to the environment. an excellent way, I would say a very inexpensive way with major benefits to educating the community on what can be done. Some of the examples of the award winners, the Mighty Branch Alliance, as well as there's an example here of Scout Troop 291 and the good work that they had done.
Under community recognition, the city came out with the spring magazine with some great articles about food composting and also about the correct way to recycle. We were also recognized by the state of Maryland for our second recertification as a sustainable community. It's a prestigious designation for municipal governments in Maryland. Municipalities that achieve the certification are considered by their peers, by state government, and by experts and civic organizations in Maryland to be among the leading municipalities. Some of the events that we've participated in or helped host, one was Montgomery County Green Fest, the H2O Oktoberfest, the Volks March, and the H2O Summit.
All right, the Green Up Day itself, we focus on a coordination with a Potomac-wide trash pickup led by Alice Ferguson Foundation. Within the city, there were 12 participating locations on that day, or during that week. They're listed there: Watkins Mill Town Center, Rabbit Road, Central Avenue, Washingtonian Woods, Kentlands, Lakelands, Malcolm King Park, St. Martin's, Hidden Creek HOA, Woods at Muddy Branch, Kelly Park, and Shahar Torah. Estimated that there were over 1,000 pounds of bulk trash collected and disposed of as a result of the cleanups. Green Up Day is organized by Alice Ferguson Foundation. They actually recognized Shahar Torah for their outstanding performance in the Cleanup Day. In addition to cleanup, the synagogue coordinated chloride testing, which highlighted some of the high chlorides in the lakes at the Kentlands. They also did an incredible counting of every piece of plastic, every piece of styrofoam, the types of, but they counted 1,024 styrofoam plastic fragments, 369 plastic wrappers. They went through an incredible inventory, and they did an outstanding job in highlighting what the majority of the trash was during their specific trash pickup.
Can I ask you a quick question, Paul? Can you, just for the audience that might be watching out there, explain the importance of the chloride testing?
Sure. I guess chloride testing is considered citizen science. It's a way to involve the community in testing some aspect of the water. Chlorides are a result of applying salts to our roads in the winter. Chlorides persist in the water late into the summer. This was in May, and the chlorides were at about 250 milligrams per liter, which is the limit for chlorides for aquatic use. So it is one of the pollutants that is a concern in the Muddy Branch watershed. In fact, a lot of the watersheds that feed the Potomac have the same chloride. It's called impairment. Mm-hmm. So involving the citizens in testing and identifying where the potential hotspots are something that's interesting for us and for the community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So our priorities, community action, and this shows kind of highlights composting. While the committee and mayor and city council are important to the protection and preservation of Gaithersburg's environment, it is the action of its citizens that will ensure its success. We can do more together. In this case, we highlighted last year one of the initiatives that the city had put on, but that the EAC had supported, and that was composting. Last year, the city started a drop-off for compost at Department of Public Works, and they've been keeping track of pounds of compost collected, as well as the 450 pounds collected. That's at public events. So those are some of the events where composting is offered for the community. That would be Oktoberfest, those type of events where one of the vendors for the city, Veterans Compost, will collect and kept track of the amount of compost collected. But the 11,960 pounds, that is as a result of those drop-off located at the Department of Public Works. That's tremendous. That's waste that would have been diverted to a landfill, but instead it was composted and turned into a useful soil by, I believe that's Key Composting. And then there's a YouTube video you can watch about the composting, and I think you were playing that before this started here.
So challenges and opportunities. And in the past year, we've certainly had some staffing issues. We lost our sustainability coordinator when Diane left, and it took a year to find Deborah. But during that year, it was a learning experience because we also found out how much the sustainability coordinator actually does for the city. We were very lucky that Andrew Benjamin and Michael Wayan from the Planning Committee and Planning Commission and from Public Works stepped up to help carry the load until Deborah could be hired, and they were a tremendous asset to us. We also had a lot of people leave because of job changes, relocating, and also life events. And so there was a lot more turnover in the past year and a half than we're accustomed to. The good side is we've picked up some really knowledgeable, energetic new members who I think will help us carry on. Collaboration. I think one of the strongest things that's happened in the past year is how closely we work now with the Stormwater Division, because most of what they do affects the environment, and that's what the committee is concerned about. One of the joint events we had 2 trips to visit Glenstone. Most people go to Glenstone to see the museums. We go to Glenstone to see the exterior with what they've done with the landscaping and with the stormwater management. So there was one that was just the committee that went, and the other was a joint visit with the Public Works Division. And then other committees. So recently we held a joint meeting with the Business and Economic Development Committee here in the city. And we were there for 2 main purposes. One was to talk about how environmental initiatives can help businesses cut expenses. And the other thing we wanted to do was we wanted to promote our annual environmental awards. That one category is to award businesses that are already doing great things for the environment, and to encourage businesses to maybe step up and do a little bit more than maybe they were doing in the past. All right. So priorities and recommendations. So under communications, outreach is always one of our most important goals to improve, and some of the things we would do as we reach out to the community is to talk about, well, we talk about recycling. And it used to be, you talk about recycling and how much tonnage can we get? And now it's how pure can our recycled materials be? Contamination is causing a lot of recycled collections to be rejected. And then it goes straight to the landfill. So you think you're doing a good job, and then somebody takes a bottle of soda or a cup of coffee, throws it into the recycling, and it not only contaminates the whole container, depending on how much there was, you could contaminate the whole truckload. So that's something we want to make people aware of, that it's not just that you're throwing it into the container, but think about what you're putting in there. And then we want to also continue our work with city committees, because we think that there's a lot of strength from working together, because the Environmental Affairs Committee probably overlaps with all the other committees in one way or another, maybe more so than other committees do. Legislative action.
Okay, so we put up here legislative action. It's one of the elements that the committee watches what's happening both in the state and county level. We did hear from the county on the action they'd taken on pesticides, and they'd recommended opting in. In fact, they gave some generous offer to take care of all the communications, etc. So they, the county themselves would offer a lot if the city were to opt in to the pesticides. So it's one of the recommendations that the committee made to the council to hold a work session specific on that. And I believe, is that upcoming in
January.
January. Composting. So composting is something obviously that has taken a foothold in the city, especially the city events, as well as what's happening at Rabbit Road. But it would be interesting to look at more opportunities to get the city more involved in composting, divert more waste that is compostable to some great product like compost. So that's something we'll be talking about in our own group in the upcoming year, and we'll probably be making some recommendations specific to composting. Native plants and stormwater management. We talked a little bit about chlorides already. Stormwater management is one of the priorities for our committee. We'll want to hear about the city's MS4 permit that has recently been achieved, and what the plans are, what the city's plans are regarding the environment and how we can play a role. And native plants, we'd like to consider maybe native plant sale this year at the Green Up Month, or the Green Month.
Okay. Easy fixes. So one of the things that we try to do is have better recycling signage at city facilities. The other thing is to have clustered bins at city events. Sometimes you go to something like Oktoberfest and there'll be a recycling bin over here, but perhaps the compost bin or trash bin may be several feet away. Possibly even having volunteers at the event to help guide people as to what goes where. You know, when you get into advanced recycling by introducing more materials to be recycled, it gets kind of complicated for many people. And then you have a lot of people who just aren't paying attention at all, or maybe they're from a different area where there is no recycling. And to help prevent them from making mistakes with where they dispose of their waste, it'd be good to have guides to help not only direct them, but also to explain why we do this type of recycling. And also like to see more compost bins at events. At the Oktoberfest, most of the compost bins were down by the Countlands Mansion, down on the lawn there. And I'd like to see them, maybe additional bins throughout the event.
Those of you in the audience tonight, you can have an impact on environmental issues of importance to you and your community. We invite you to attend any of our meetings and join the conversation. Or if you'd like to attend all of our meetings, there are 2 open seats on the committee. Instructions for applying can be found on the city website, or you can email our staff liaison, Deb Moran, whose information is on the screen. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Appreciate
I
it.
have a few questions before we.
Well, we'll get to you.
okay.
Thanks, Lori. Thank you.
We're dismissing that. I want to make sure. Go ahead, Mayor.
Appreciate all the work that you guys have put in. Jeanette, welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
You guys mentioned that we do have a plan for a work session to discuss the county pesticide law, and I believe that's January 27. So we'll look forward to that. And now I will turn it over to Lorianne for some questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So, thank you for that presentation. It looks like you found a few good new members, so I'm excited for the EAC committee. I did want to ask, you guys do a lot of community engagement. I was wondering if you measure it. Like, are you documenting how many people are participating in these events? All of the community cleanups, Green Up Month. Just want to know if we're, with all of the advertising that we do, are we getting that return on our investment, and if we can support any other way to.
It's a good question. I guess we had our own conversation internally about what our role is in community engagement, whether we're meant to be the community engagers, whether we're meant to promote events maybe that would engage the community. But that's a great recommendation, that when events are created, we should measure the response.
Is it
I think this year,
increasing,
actually,
or-
I think this year, the one thing that we did hear about was the paper recycling or the shredding event had a low attendance this year. Whether it was the date that we chose, whether there were a lot of things that were
happening?
affecting that. But I do know that at least the city is keeping track of engagement and adjusting for that. We may move that event, I think, until April. Yeah, so maybe potentially to April, because we get more response. I guess too, the number of trash pickups that happen and the amount of trash picked up, that is all measured. We haven't gotten a report ourselves. That would probably be interesting for us to consider how much there was this year versus last year, and what should a goal be. But we can bring that back and discuss that. That's a good idea.
And then the other question is, are we picking up more trash or less trash because we're doing a better job?
Exactly.
Or are people more careful with their waste and making sure it gets into a container? And also on windy days, people are making sure that there's a lid on top of the recycling bin.
Yeah.
So a lot of people intentionally do a good job of recycling, but then they don't have a lid on it. It's out on a windy day and everything blows out.
No, good. So I know Mike asked about the chlorine levels, the chloride levels. I was wondering, what are the risks of high levels of chloride in the water, and how can we improve the water quality? I know that, is there anything that we can do, or is it just on the?
Yeah, the type of salt, sodium chloride, has both the sodium and the chloride ions. Sodium is important for people that have hypertension or high blood pressure. So when that shows up in our drinking water, that's a concern. So the Mighty Branch does feed into the Potomac, which feeds into where we get our drinking water from. So higher chloride levels will also mean higher sodium levels. Chlorides, if you remember what happened in Flint, Michigan with the pipes and the lead that contaminated the drinking water, chlorides were a contributor to that. So the high chlorides in the pipes allows certain metals to leach out or to affect the pH. So there are potential impacts on drinking water, but more importantly, or more visibly, it affects what lives in the stream. So we want our streams to be fishable and swimmable. They're not fishable if we don't have the little critters in there that support the fish. So when the chlorides get to that 250 or above, that starts affecting what lives in the stream. And that's why our stream has been identified by the state of Maryland as impaired for chlorides. And that's why, because of what lives in the stream. We know that there's something's causing that, and that's those high chlorides.
It also has an effect on vegetation. So if its chloride level's too high, then certain plants won't grow or will be damaged.
So is there anything that we can do on our end, or is that because of the people who are salting, we have to put pressure on them to
Yeah,
do something else?
The solution is to somehow use less. And what does that mean? Looking at what other municipalities, state of Minnesota is trying to reduce their salt use by 50%. And they're trying to do that based on being smarter about how they apply salts. Salts are effective at certain temperatures. Salts, if they're spread across the whole road surface, it doesn't help drivers. So you want to apply salt. So brining, that's one thing the city does. The city lays down brine before it snows. That helps reduce the amount of salt used. But if you look at some of the contractors that work in the communities throughout the city or in the parking lots, and you'll see those piles of salt that are left over, that's an area to work on. That's one thing that, just mentioned Minnesota, but there was a presentation by the state of Minnesota. They talked about what can you do in those situations, and that's train the contractors on how to apply it more effectively. And indeed, they're not interested in using too much salt. They'd like to use the right amount of salt. So that's one way to engage those contractors that are putting salt in the city and look at how we can reduce the amount of salt that they're using. But there's really once it's in the water, there's no way to take it out. So it's
Too late.
yeah, too late.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Mike? Go to you next, Rob.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good, I like the list of priorities are important. I agree with those. I think there's some opportunities here. Clearly, I think that, we've talked in previous, from previous presentations about coordinating with other committees, and I'm glad to see that happening. I think that's going to bear good fruit. And like you said, the work of this committee kind of, it has threads through all of the other committees in the city. I think that's pretty important. So the composting idea, I think it seems to have caught on, and I think we have to look at ways to expand that, and I'm not sure how to expand it, except to perhaps have other, additional sites. That'll mean working closely with Public Works and perhaps Park and Rec. I think the idea of clustered bins at events is pretty important now. If you go down to a big event and like a run or something like that, or a festival down in the district, in the mall or something, they actually have volunteers that basically monitor the bins, and they tell you where, which bin for which thing you're throwing away. So, and especially for composting, they're pretty rigid. I mean, I've seen them dig stuff out and put it in the right bin too. So I think that there's you have to find some really good volunteers and people that are willing to do that kind of thing. But I think that's a good idea. I think the idea that we did start clustering bins in terms of recyclables and trash, and I think we just need to take the next step in terms of that. And given that we've refined our kind of division of what could be recyclable and what we now have to consider trash as well. So I was wondering if there's any opportunity to involve businesses in composting, particularly restaurants and grocery stores, companies like that, and whether or not we could provide some guidance or advice, and perhaps that might be something to consider countywide as well.
At the Business and Economic Development Committee meeting, we had brought up that Montgomery County has, twice a year, they have business recycling seminars, and they talk about composting. And many of the people in attendance didn't know about
Mhm.
these events. So I think getting the word out about those seminars when they're going to happen, letting businesses know would go a great deal towards helping businesses learn how they can save money on disposing of waste, for one thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think AstraZeneca had made some claim of, I don't know if they compost 100% of the food scraps from.
AstraZeneca has 2 net zero cafes on campus.
Yeah, so, if, a company like that can do that, you would expect, other companies to be able to do that, especially if they offer food services, but even restaurants and, any kind of
Well,
restaurant.
and the other thing, too, to think about
There's a lot of
with
food
food
waste.
waste is a lot of times we empty the trash not because it's full, because it starts to smell.
You're right.
Well, what's smelling in there is the food waste.
Right.
So if you separate the food waste into a separate container, then maybe you don't have to empty your trash or have your trash picked up quite as often.
So, it's just an idea, I think some more research on that, and maybe perhaps how the city might help facilitate that, working with other government, county and even state. And then I was wondering, I know we've had demonstration projects at different events, but something like an annual demonstration of how to build a rain garden to manage, drainage and water at your home, telling people or explaining to people the best way to set up rain barrels, those kinds of things. I mean, some ways to. I know it takes a lot more volunteers when you do these kinds of things, but I think it might be a way to attract organizations to help, particularly the Boy Scouts. So I'm glad to see the efforts. You guys deserve some credit for sticking to it with the staff changes and the committee changes and everything else. But I think I think you would think that this committee would have an easier time of attracting members. So I think that, and then people bring good ideas. So thanks for the report.
Rob?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Environmental Affairs Committee members. Very pleased to be your council liaison. I'll say that I enjoy, of 3 committees that I am a liaison to, you're one of my 3 favorite committees. So I really do love the work that we do, and I want to welcome Deborah to the mix, who's I think, going to walk into the role with a lot of enthusiasm. In fact, my first conversation with her, she was peppering me with ideas of things that we could look into. One of them, for example, was a kind of a lending library of equipment to do energy audits on housing. So basically, you have equipment that ordinarily a household wouldn't be able to afford, but when you have a communal use for it, it becomes affordable. So it allows people to do energy audits of their own homes to figure out where they can improve. I mean, it's great ideas like that. Composting, I think that we've been pushing that, and it's finally taking a hold. You've seen the usage of the one facility going up prodigiously over the past year, and then there's discussions about expanding that to the Kentlands. I would like to pursue any methodologies to improve and expand composting in the city. Mike has some great ideas in that regard. Perhaps expanding composting facilities to the east side of Gaithersburg as well, so that it becomes convenient for people to use. Looking forward to the pesticide discussion. One thing I was harping on Andrew about, and I'm sad he's not here to harp on about it some more, is because it's his expertise, is the expansion of the tree canopy here in Gaithersburg. And so one of the things, I'm not sure if he did it to placate me, but we had a tree planting in my own community a few years back, but I haven't really seen much since then. So I'd like to see discussions in that regard as well. And I'd like to take a second to kind of commend staff as well in working with the committee on, for example, Britta is putting out a lot more information, I can tell, on environmental topics, and it's very heartening to see those in our publications, because really, any ideas that staff comes out with, Britta is our megaphone. She amplifies the message and she gets it out there. And then kind of also where Lori Ann was talking about salting and ways that we can reduce it. I commend Mike Johnson on his staff taking actions to reduce salt use as we make the roads safe for our residents. For example, the brining solution has played a large part in reducing the use of salt. So I commend them to keep looking at ways to become more environmentally friendly going forward in the city's operations. But thank you for the presentation, and look forward to working with you in this coming year.
Thanks, Rob. Neil?
Just very briefly, thanks for the presentation tonight. Thanks for all your good work. You're one of the really very active committees, not just having meetings, but spreading the word and creating events all over the city, and it's great. I wanted to especially thank the two of you, Jeanette and Doug, for coming to the Economic Development Committee meeting. I was a little concerned when I saw the agenda that people would find that it was off topic, but as you saw, people were very engaged and there were a lot of great ideas about how to do better. So great work. Maybe you can go visit some of the other committees and fire them up as well.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Not too much to add other than to echo most of what's already been said, and to thank all of you, not just those of you who are here making the presentation, but the entire committee for all of your good work. We pride ourselves on being a green city. We've got the tree and the symbol of the city, and we try to take that seriously and not just have it be a platitude. And the good work of your committee and all the staff who's supporting the work that your committee is doing, and the efforts that we try to make in terms of policy and programming, we really try to make that a reality. So thank you for all you do. Just a couple quick updates on some specific policy items. I've been having a number of conversations with staff and various vendors and financiers in the solar roofing industry over the last several months, trying to figure out if there's any viability to the possibility of putting some solar panels on municipally owned buildings around the city. It's a lot more complicated than people might assume. It's not something you can just sort of decide to do one day. It depends on the structure of the different roofs of the municipal facilities, how old they are, when's the replacement schedule for those roofs, are they of the right design, are they pointed in the right direction, is there enough sunlight on those roofs, is there enough square footage total to make it financially viable for financing. So we're still working through some of those questions. Found it to be more of a hurdle than I had hoped. I know a number of us have solar on our own roofs, our own home roofs. I've had on my roof for several years now, and it just seems to be a great opportunity to make use of that real estate for environmental purposes. So we'll keep doing the research, and we'll keep the committee apprised of any developments, but it's sort of slow going at this point, but we're going to keep that conversation going. The other thing I wanted to mention is I know that there's been a lot of attention paid to composting, and your presentation talked a lot about it. I know Rob and others are supportive of expanding our composting services, and I'm glad to see we've been engaging in various experiments with it. For a number of weeks, I did deliver my home compost to the Public Works facility until, I'll have to confess, the time it took to get over there, and wasn't thrilled about putting my compost bags as they were deteriorating into the trunk of my car on the drive over. And so my wife and I caved, and we signed up for a private nonprofit pickup service curbside, and we love it, and our kids love it. It's an educational opportunity for our family. We feel like we're doing good, and so we're having some serious conversations about figuring out what we can do to scale, given the costs and given the fact that there are not as many composting facilities that will receive the material in our area as we would like, but as we create more and more demand for it because consumers want to do it, because they're being socially responsible, hopefully there will be more and more facilities for us to be able to process it at scale at a reasonable cost, so that we don't have to, if we do decide to do curbside pickup at some point in the future, we don't have to charge our residents a ton of money for it. I believe that our most recent RFP that just went out for recycle pickup, staff can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's recycle pickup or if it was for yard waste pickup. Maybe it was for yard waste pickup. Had a clause in it that said that if and when it becomes financially viable and a desire of the city to do a curbside pickup program for composting, that whichever vendors end up winning the contract are supposed to sort of acknowledge in advance that we might require them to do composting pickup as well. Did I get that right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Yes.
I did get that
I
right,
can't
right?
remember which
Okay.
contract.
Yeah, I think it was the yard waste, right?
Wait,
yeah.
Deb, please come to a microphone.
Sorry, they are the same bid, so curbside yard waste and curbside recycling are together.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. So that's an exciting open door for the possibility at some point in the future, if and when we can make it work. I also just in the last week or two had a conversation with the mayor of Tacoma Park. Tacoma Park is now doing curbside pickup for composting as well. The scale of their program is a little bit smaller, and they're basically doing it in-house with their own public works staff. I'm not sure that's something that we could do given the size of our city, but we're continuing to have those conversations and try to learn from other municipalities who are looking into this. So we'll keep you apprised of that as well. But again, we just want you to know we take very seriously the policy recommendations that you all have been making to us, and are just really grateful for all the work that you've been doing to shine a light on these various environmental programs that we have in the city. Thank you.
All right, I want to open it up. If there's anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this topic about environmental affairs, this would be the time. Not seeing anybody? Okay, well then, we thank you very much for your presentation, for all that you do, and we will continue outreach on our end to try to get some more members onto the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to business and economic development. Tom Lonergan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While we get settled here. Oh, no, that's not us. Different E. Where is- Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Happy to be here tonight as staff liaison to the Economic and Business Development Committee here in the city, and very pleased to be joined by Eric Morrison. In addition to being the head of capital planning at AstraZeneca, he is either an 8 or 9-year member of our committee. We couldn't remember, but it's been a long time, and we're very pleased that he's here to join us tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you, Tom. So on behalf of Tom and the whole committee, I'd like to thank the mayor and city council for allowing us to provide our annual briefing. So in 2019, the committee continued to tap into the knowledge of a diverse set of professionals from our community. The committee was facilitated by Sharon Disk and Tom Lonergan. We'd also like to thank Councilmember Neil Harris for his ongoing support as the committee liaison. So a key premise for the committee has been that the city needs to maintain a growing and sustainable tax base. And so with that lens, the committee reviews a variety of development opportunities and discusses proposed land regulations with an eye for 3 things. 1, retaining the existing businesses that are in the community. 2, attracting new businesses to come to the community. And 3, fulfilling more of an ombudsman's role of liaising with development groups and as well as city and county agencies. So during our monthly meetings, we review a variety of topics, have some very lively discussions, with a baseline understanding of the community's strengths and the weaknesses. So Gaithersburg has an advantage of being a suburb of a major metropolitan area, and we have a well-educated workforce here in the city. The area has a robust public transportation network that's a benefit not only to the residents but also to the businesses that are here. And furthermore, the city has the ability to provide local incentives to encourage its businesses to grow in our community. Now, while there are all these great strengths, there are also several challenges that can hinder us from meeting our overall vision. One of which being a soft office market that currently is in place. Also, there's been high demand for lab space that personally affects our business as well. With the limited number of inventory of lab space, it's hard for new businesses to come in or businesses who are already here to grow their R&D labs. And lastly, the utilization and the image of the Frederick Avenue corridor and the Old Town. That's an opportunity that can be further developed. So all of these topics and a variety of other topics are what are discussed during our meetings. So the members really enjoy being on the committee because we get the opportunity to discuss these wide variety of topics. Simply put, the topics can be categorized into 3 areas. We talk about proposed project reviews, we talk about city guidelines and planning reviews, and we also collaborate, as you heard earlier from the previous committee, we collaborate among other committees as well as other local jurisdictions. So I'd briefly like to touch upon some key highlights from the year. In the winter, Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich provided a keynote address at the 2019 committee breakfast. It was interesting to listen to his goals and aspirations for the county and to hear how his issues like transportation funding can support the city's goals to grow business and support its residents. And over the summer, the commercial permitting manager, Emerd, gave an overview of the International Green Construction Code and how it supports the city's sustainability goals. Following the presentation, our committee had a lively discussion about how the code is similar and different from the LEED standards set up by the U.S. Green Building Council, which is currently a widely used standard throughout the country. So, move ahead. So, looking ahead to 2020, the committee is poised to address several topics that impact the community. We know one of the topics that's of utmost importance to this committee is Lake Forest Mall. The committee's already had several discussions about that as talks continue with the current landowners and as the city looks at ways of looking at zoning ordinances and for the site. And we're sure to consider more opportunities for infill and redevelopment of the sector along 355. I mean, we think those are going to be 2 of the big topics that will come up in 2020. So that concludes our annual briefing. At this time, Tom and I would welcome any questions that you might have.
Eric, thank you very much for the presentation. Tom, good job with the slides. We
pay the big bucks.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We appreciate all the work and feedback that we get from you guys. There were a few times over this past year where recommendations from your committee, I think, really factored into decisions, or at least into our thinking about issues that's come before us. So we appreciate that. Questions, comments, Lorianne.
So thank you for the presentation. This is a really great committee to learn about what's happening with future developments in the city. I did want to ask a little bit about something you mentioned. So while we need more lab space, I think we skipped a slide because we have the project coming up for 700 North Frederick Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exciting that we are expanding not only our bio space, but we're also expanding across 270 to the east side. So it's an exciting project, and with the demand, I'm hoping it fills up very quickly. So thank you for sharing that. And as far as retention and jobs, I think I mentioned this to Tom a while ago about seeing more kiosks at our businesses. I went to the CVS, and now they only have 1 cashier and now 2 electronic kiosks for people to check out. And I'm seeing that more and more in our businesses, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that we are forecasting or foresee us proposing to businesses who are basically eliminating jobs and replacing them with automation. If we can, maybe have a meeting dedicated to that and some suggestions on how we can respond as a city, or however at maybe a different level. So I'd love to get some feedback.
We'd be happy to schedule a meeting discussion on that, Lorianne.
Okay, all right. So that's it. Thank you.
Mike.
So recently I attended the Region Forward meeting for the Council of Governments, and one of the issues that we talked about was actually housing affordability in the region, but also an element related to the sustainability of affordable housing how that's related to the economy, but also viewing things through an equity lens in terms of economic development, so that all segments of the community actually benefit from this. I think Lorianne touched on this in terms of employment as well. So the impact of some economic development actually does affect the people who are able to live here, people who can afford to live here, and we don't want to create a community that excludes people just because of their income level, and I think we have to keep that in mind. So that might be something that your committee could talk about, is using an equity lens to look at economic development throughout the city, so that we hear quite often, both from our residents and from each other, the issue of the differences between economic development opportunities and risks on the west and the east side of 270. And I think we have to begin to take hopefully that's going to be important as we go forward in considering the priorities that you mentioned, particularly with opportunities like Forest and on 355. I think we need to think about. So I hope that perhaps your committee will address that to some extent, apply this equity lens as we look at opportunities and challenges going forward.
We can do that.
That's really, the work of over the period of time that I've been on the council, I've seen the committee evolve, and the membership evolve, and I think it's been in a positive direction, and I think the contributions of the committee in terms of how all of us look at things has been important. So I fully expect that to continue. So I want to thank you for your efforts, and thank all the members of the committee for their contributions, and those that have contributed in the past, but because of other opportunities weren't able to continue their participation. So, but it's nice to see some continuity with the long-term members as well. So.
Thank you, Mike. And I don't want to interrupt, but if I could just add, when we were here a year ago, there was some mention, I believe, by you and perhaps by Lorianne also, about as we add new members to try to consider adding even more women to the committee. And I wanted to point out 3 that have joined the committee this year: Barbara Cruz from Johns Hopkins University, Judy Costello from BioHealth Innovation, and Nadia Khan from the County Economic Development Agency. Sorry to interrupt, but.
No, you're talking about the diversity of the committee, and I think the gender diversity is important. So is the racial and ethnic diversity of the committee as well. So we are home to a lot of minority-owned businesses, particularly on the east side of the city. So I know it's been difficult, but I know you've made efforts, but I think we have to continue until we bear fruit on that.
Will do.
So anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we go to open up to the public?
Again, just echo the great work. I had the good fortune to be the liaison to the committee a couple of years ago, and just always really enjoyed interacting with the group. Very thoughtful. It's an interesting group because, well, not unlike the Environmental Affairs Committee, you're dealing with big picture kind of philosophical and policy questions, and at the same time, specific programs to try to implement some of the ideas. Balancing those two roles very, very well. I like to talk to Tom a lot offline about economic development wins. And I guess, the elected leadership of every local government wants to be able to point to something specific and say, there's a concrete win, something we got. And obviously, it's not just for point scoring. It's because we know that every time we get one of those wins, it means something very real in our community in terms of tax base and job opportunities and redevelopment and capital assets being invested in. But I've been fairly impressed with the record of wins we've had in the last couple of years, and that's obviously due in large part to our staff and our other community and business stakeholders and partners that we work with. But it has been due in no small part to the work of this committee as well in encouraging those wins. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to comment on?
May I jump in?
Oh, sure. I was before. You didn't say anything.
I wasn't ready.
Okay, now you're ready. Go right ahead.
He's
All right,
liaison, so he should get the last word.
I should get the last word. More.
But I still want to jump in too, so I'll go.
Well, then I don't get the last word. Anyway, I just, so during the election season, one of the main topics that I heard from people on the east side of town was that they felt that their part of town needed more attention. And I'd just like to point out that in the 2020 priorities slide, the first 4 items out of 6 are focused on the east side of town. I think that the reality is that the city's proactive efforts over a number of years have really been largely focused on the east side of town because it's a harder job, because it's older and pretty much built up, and redevelopment is harder, whereas, you know, when you have an empty green field, the developers look at it and they don't really need a lot of assistance. They just need to work with planning and code. So, you know, Lake Forest Mall, infill and redevelopment opportunities along 355, Old Town revitalization, and enterprise and opportunity zones, which are entirely focused on the east side of town, the Old Town corridor and Lake Forest. And the last two items, biotech and innovation, which happens all over the city, and diversifying the local economy also. I mean, I think your team and the committee and the city in general have really been doing their best. It's just takes more work and more money and more effort, which is ongoing. So I don't want the east side of town to feel like they're left out. They're really getting an awful lot of attention.
They are.
But and anyway, thanks for the good work. I've been not just the liaison of the committee for the last couple of years, but I've been a member of the committee, not quite as long as Eric, but for a number of years, and you do great work. I'd just like to point out to the public, unlike many committees, this committee is full up and there's no room for new members, but meetings are open to the public.
That's right.
And they're very interesting, so I recommend people coming out, and there's usually coffee in Danish.
What? There is.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ditto. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That
I
was
got the last
it?
word.
That was it.
Okay, is there anybody here tonight who'd like to say a couple words about economic development, or going once, going twice? Okay,
One quick
go right ahead.
point. So I know that the Department of Labor with the state, they usually track job trends. Can we have that incorporated if possible for the city? We can find out that data
Yeah.
for the city.
We can do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to Community Advisory Committee. Invite Barbara Harbison, our Community Advisory Committee Chair, to the presentation table with our own Maureen Herndon.
Can you hear me? Oh, you better sit on it. Yeah, here you go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. So let me get this right. Okay. So, my name's Maureen Herndon, and I'm the committee liaison for the Community Advisory Committee. I'd like to introduce Barbara Harbison as our as our new chairperson for the Community Advisory Committee, and thank her and all the members for the tremendous level of work and caring and interest that they put into the committee. So
We echo those things.
So I'll hand it over to Barbara.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's our intent that this presentation will provide you with the information for a dialogue between the council and the CAC. The Community Advisory Committee mission is to explore the process for selecting and giving grants to various nonprofits for identified services to the citizens of Gaithersburg. To this end, we must first identify any gaps in services and any unmet needs of the citizens. We recommend priorities each year as those gaps or unmet needs constantly change. Through our grant portal, implemented in 2018, we review and score received grant applications. This review and scoring process results in funding recommendations for the city manager, the mayor, and council. Once the contract is in place, we conduct at least one site visit per contract, and through quarterly reports, we monitor equitable service policies and statistics. We also foster communications between our providers with quarterly provider meetings. Lastly, we do provide input to the city legislative platform. our committee members, sort of small compared to the others. Diane, by the way, is in her second year. And it's misspelled.
No, it is.
It is, I'm in my third year
Sorry, Barbara.
and chair. Nora is in her second year, and Barbara is our newest member and has never been through the process of doing a grant. So we're a little young, relatively young committee and small.
Oops.
Of course, we have, well, we miss Britta, is our really, our relationship person to the council, tells us a lot and guides us. Maureen, who sits beside us, has valuable information about community services in other municipalities. And Carla Contreras keeps our calendar. Very important role. Now, how do we begin this process? At the start of any new fiscal year, we begin by reviewing the Family Self-Sufficiency Start and CFED Assets and Opportunities Scoreboard. Montgomery County now reports that 4-person family needs over $91,000 a year to live a reasonable life. This compares to Gaithersburg's median income of over $85,000 a year. That's a $6,000 deficit. 1 in 5 Gaithersburg residents is liquid poor, meaning they cannot sustain 3 months' loss of income. Why? Well, housing costs in Gaithersburg have risen 19% over the last 10 years. And by the way, child care costs keep going up too. Gaithersburg residents of color have a significantly lower median income. We've yet to determine why this is. And as the second most diverse city in the country, 40% of our population is foreign-born, and nearly half of that group speaks English at a very well level. Now, based on this information, we formulate our scopes of work. This year, we used an additional source of information, not on the slide. It was a survey of the Gaithersburg residents over the holiday season. Based on this survey, the committee approved 3 new focus service areas, while continuing to provide safety nets and educational service, bringing our total number of service areas to 8. These services are provided by 20 nonprofit organizations. Each focus area has a lead provider who coordinates with the other providers and submits the required committee reporting. All services must be free of charge, easily accessible. We require the 20 nonprofits to be committed to diversity and equitable outreach and service delivery. And we foster that communication between providers by providing referrals and quarterly provider meetings. Now, for 2020, we have 8 scope categories, 5 of which have been around for a while, and the 3 are new this year. For the 5 well-defined, I've used the statistics from their year-end reports, so these are FY19 results. Food and nutrition. It's provided by Manna Food, Gaithersburg Help, and Nourish Now, with Manna Food being the lead. We serviced over 5,000 households, and in addition, 564 students through the backpack program. That provides students with food for the weekend. The big event for FY19 was the opening of the Choice Pantry at the Gaithersburg Middle School. And this provides a certain level of dignity. People now shop for their food. The folks who come to this are saying things like, a mother who had a child who requires daily medication. She also has other children who like to eat. She went to MANA and particularly Gaithersburg Help. She was constantly struggling with whether to eat or to give her child medication. Well, she was really helped. But you know what her comment was? It was, "Thanks for treating me with such dignity." Housing stabilization for singles and families. It is provided by Interfaith Works as our lead. Dwelling Place, Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, and the Rainbow Place Shelter. It provides shelter or supporting sometimes permanent housing, and it's provided to 28 homeless families and 94 singles. In the range of what people are talking about, we had an unintended outcome here. 2 of the service clients became volunteers at Rainbow Place. Something we weren't expecting, but that's what we got. Vocational coaching services. It's provided by Interfaith Works, Career Catchers, and Catholic Charities. Interfaith Works is the lead. This service is provided for both the underemployed and the unemployed. This contract was renewed for 2020. In other words, we took their FY19 contract and just renewed it instead of asking them to make a new application. This renewal idea reduces the work for the committee. We have less grants to review. And it's also very good for our provider because they're guaranteed that amount of money. Believe me, what they ask for in the grant is not necessarily what we give them. So they really know what they're going to get for this year. So that's vocational coaching services was our renewal contract for this year. This contract focuses on resume development, job referrals and application assistance, and support after hiring. 98 citizens received service in FY19. They are pleased to report that 68 had secured employment with wages above minimum wage. And even a few are earning between $25 and $28 an hour. Health and mental assistance. It's provided by Mobile Med, Gaithersburg Help, the Mercy Health Clinic, Holy Cross Health Center, Korean Community Service, and Aspiring Counseling. We are looking at people who are, both people who are insured and those citizens that are not insured or underinsured. In the area, folks are saying a client came to them and she received an annual checkup. She was she was suffering from migraine headaches and knee pain. And guess what? She got help. For the first time, she is now on the pathway to health with constant and consistent medical assistance. financial empowerment, and housing preservation services. It's provided by the Housing Initiative Partnership, Family Services, and Upper Montgomery Assistant Network. They report that 103 received one-on-one coaching and financial education under this contract. Additionally, 1,500 residents, both adults and youth, receive services through the Gaithersburg Financial Wellness Coalition and Bank on Gaithersburg education events. They also utilize the VITA site. As you can see, 84% received an increase in their savings and/or credit score and reduced debt. Now, for this fiscal year, as I said before, there were 3 new service areas. We'd call them smaller or startup kind of grants. We determined via that holiday survey that I mentioned before that we were missing these areas, but for the first time, we added demographics to the focus area. And you can see those demographics clearly here. First and foremost, services for seniors and adults with disabilities, which is done by Aspiring Counseling and Gaithersburg Help and Home Care Partners. We anticipate 138 residents will receive mental health counseling, transportation to doctors, and an aging in place services for non-medical services like going shopping, housekeeping, that kind of thing. Our second area is bilingual addiction services and education carried on by Avery Road Association and the Tree of Hope. And they will give outreach programs in both English and Spanish to 25 city residents. They conduct something they call coffee houses and other social events in and around the city as an outreach and treatment technique for addictions. This focus area was specifically for the Latino community, which we determined through that survey. And that is why it is English and Spanish. The immigration and naturalization area is serviced by the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center. And they're going to provide immigration legal service and citizens education to 32 city residents. And this is focused on the Asian community, again, as per that survey. So we're looking forward to seeing the progress on these 3 areas.
So Barbara, I'll make one correction.
Sure.
It is Asian Pacific American Legal, but it's focused like on anyone that
Yes.
needs that service. It's not really
Yes.
specifically just for,
But
but they
yeah.
serve the whole community.
Okay, this concludes our review of this year's grants, but there's still other things we need to do. First of all, we need to expand our committee. Okay, we got 4 people. Makes quorums very easy. It also makes breaking ties a little hard. So we need to conduct some sort of citywide recruitment effort, and all ideas are welcomed. This year, we will focus on 8 contracts, but 5 of the contract areas are pretty well known and defined, and 1 was renewed from last year. Well, we need to look and see whether we can do more multi-year contracts. Can we renew more of those 5 that we know so well about? Again, it would reduce our work, and it makes them have a guaranteed sum of income for the next year. We also need to review those year-end reports to better understand demographics. When we looked at putting the new areas and we ended up with demographics there, we looked at our reporting and we have never asked the question, of demographics about the citizens that we're servicing. We don't have any idea. So we're going to add that and have added that to our quarterly reporting so that we'll be able to really understand what the demographics are. And with new members, we certainly should evaluate our mission and our work plan and make sure we're pretty clear on our terms and our activities. And let me conclude by inviting you to attend any of our CAC meetings, our provider meetings, or even go with us on our site visits. I'll entertain any questions now.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Maureen. This is, it's hard to overstate how important the work of this committee is in the recommendations that you provide to the mayor and council. It's really, it's a great service that you're providing. The message is heard loud and clear. I saw sort of everybody up here scribbling down notes that we need to recruit members for the committee. I personally will put out calls on social media. I'm sure others will do the same. We're going to try to get some more committee members. In fact, your newest member, Barbara Mai, is my next door neighbor.
She certainly is.
Yes.
And we want to thank you for recruiting her.
You're welcome. I'm sure she's going to be a good contributor to the committee. So please hang in there, and we're gonna build up that committee. But the work is so important, and we're very glad and very grateful for what you do. Let me start with Rob. Do you want to start, since I haven't started with you tonight?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara and Maureen. I think Judd hit the nail on the head with respect to the work that this committee does. It's truly vital to providing the support networks for our community and making sure that all of our residents are included. But particularly, what I appreciate is what I call the pitch night that you guys have been doing for the last few years, where it really hits home the needs of the community and what all of our coalition of providers are doing, the great work that they're doing. And then, of course, at the end, there's the ask for continued support or additional support. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that level of engagement, because it really hits home for me and allows me to put into context all the work that's being done and the needs that need to be met. And ultimately, when time comes to pass the budget, I have context for what the dollars are going to. So thank you for doing that, and please keep doing that. Just wanted to mention, actually, two things. The first thing substantive is we've been engaged recently by an organization called the Human Rights Campaign, and they kind of have given us a context for what we do well in the area of LGBTQ support, and what we need to do better, or what we could do better, and they do it through a scoring mechanism. And part of that is support to the LGBTQ community that I think would fall under the CAC's mandate. And so I'd encourage you, and I know Maureen's been in on the conversation, if you could, to just take a look at the criteria that they've got out there, seeing if we could adjust, or if there is the need to adjust goals, grant priorities to perhaps service an underutilized or underrepresented community, if in fact that is the case here in Gaithersburg. Second one is kind of just an off the cuff, other than the Economic Business Development Committee, all of our committees seem to need folks to participate. So I just want to throw out an idea of, perhaps we need a committee social where, all the committee members come together, and then we invite everybody in the city of Gaithersburg to come and talk to those people to try to recruit them. Maybe we serve some food. Maybe we serve some other things.
Waiting for the B word.
Waiting for that.
But just a way, maybe one event, maybe a few events throughout the year that we really try to drum up support for folks to come and engage and find out all the great things that you can do serving on a committee.
Thanks, Rob. I'll note before I turn it over to the next council member that, to Rob's point, we can always do better. when it comes vis-a-vis the Human Rights Campaign LGBT survey, but we did get a 93 out of 100 on that survey, so I just didn't want to sell us short. We got an A. Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob already touched on what I was going to touch on, but
The social?
The social, I love it. It's like Club Rush, but here in Gaithersburg. So I just want to thank Barbara. She's just been such a great volunteer and advocate and champion for this committee. I know with the budget that we allocate to support, the fourth arm of government, which is our nonprofit community, to do the work that we aren't able to do directly, is commendable, and I really think we should do a better job of highlighting the numbers and really showing year to year how many people we're impacting. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? I think demographics is key. Being, the most diverse city in the country, we need to highlight the diversity and who we're impacting and how we're impacting. I mean, we're touching on every single aspect. All we talk about is the need for affordable housing, and look at how many people that we are, preventing from becoming another statistic. And so I would love to see more data behind that. And, part of the self-sufficiency standard is also about making sure that we have the jobs here. If we have low-income populations, they need to be able to get to jobs within the community. So I know we talked about committees doing work together, collaborating. It would be good to collaborate with the Economic Development Committee and find out how we can do more collaborations around job centers, job opportunities, and see how we can pass that along to our nonprofit community and things like that. I love that, we've started bundling these nonprofits, and they are, going after these grants together. I think that was a great idea. I'm glad it's still happening. Yes. I did want to ask about, I know Manna started the middle school pantry. How are those referrals done? Do we get referrals through the city, or is that just handled through the programs, the nonprofits?
It's just handled through, and folks can basically just go there. So we're not involved with signing people up or anything.
No.
But it's like the accessibility of it is off the charts. I mean, where it's sitting, so it's really serving mostly city residents.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more like a, your local shopping market, like Giant. So it's more like going there. So we don't do anything about referring people if they show up.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering if enough people know about it. Because I know that you get a lot of calls about, food insecurity and things like that. So I'm wondering how many of those people are actually following up with these organizations, and are they knowledgeable? Do they know about them? Are we getting less calls?
Well, one thing I would say that if a person shows up for any of our services across the board, that's one of the reasons we have provider meetings. The providers would really look and find out and say, oh, this person needs food. Even though they're here for housing stabilization, they also need food. So they would definitely get referred to Amana or Nourish Now or Gaithersburg Help. That's one of the things that we really foster through our provider meetings, this inner referral.
Okay.
And also in the contracts, we basically require all our contracted agencies to work with and refer to each other. So there's a lot of that back and forth. But from our office, we try to take every opportunity for big events like the Holiday Giving Program on Saturday to give comprehensive information resource packets to every family that came through, one of which is, all the food resources in the area, all our financial education resources, information on the census. We picked the key things in English and Spanish. So using those big events that are entirely city residents, the open houses at the schools, we do the same thing. So I know we will never reach 100%, but it's every day hitting from a lot of different angles.
Okay.
But any new suggestions are welcome, of course.
Yes, so I'm looking at the slide from page 11 about the new focus area for grants and programs. And I remember when I was recruited for the county's version of this committee, the Montgomery County Community Action Agency, I found out because there was a flyer in my building. And I think that's something, if we're looking at these new communities, you know, the seniors, mental health, we have tons of senior facilities. Bilingual, we have tons of apartments, and so these communities that we are allocating money towards need to be the same communities that we should be engaging with as well to recruit for volunteers. And so,
And I must add committee members, and I thank Mike to bringing up the, racial equity lens, because when we do all get together and look at recruitment of committees, our committees, in my opinion, especially the ones involving these issues, need to represent our city.
Definitely.
So it's not only just getting folks on the committee, it's targeted outreach and talking to friends and friends of friends. That's part of our mission for both our committees, is this year to make our committees represent more our city. It's really the only way we'll
It's
all really
very
understand
important.
the best way to serve. So I just wanted to add that part. But as far as like getting folks to access these services, the numbers are never an issue. Well, some of them we don't fund a lot, but a lot of people are taking advantage of the seniors and adults services. But we will keep getting the word out to all our partners in the Gaither Center and the Oaks and Forest Oak and all the places that, have those populations.
I guess one thing I want to say about the diversity of the committee, we need men.
Yes, you said that too. We also need.
It sounds rather strange, but truthfully, we are a committee of all females. So we don't have the advantage of even having a male voice of any type on this committee.
check out the Economic Development Committee in the morning. You'll find something.
We very much support that idea, working with other
Yes,
committees.
we
So
do.
we'll be following up on both the Environmental and the Economic Development Committee.
Lorianne, did you have any more?
Nope, just thank
Okay.
you.
Ryan?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you all for your important work. Barbara, knowing you as I do, I'm surprised half of Asbury isn't signing up to be on this committee. But kidding aside, it's always great to see you at Asbury and at Wells Robinson House. And it's nice to have you here at City Hall this evening. And thanks for a great presentation. Thanks, of course, as always, to Maureen and her staff who do so much as such a small staff. I think, as a lot of folks know, the cause and the work that this particular committee, as well as the Educational Enrichment Committee, does is near and dear to me. It's something I've really worked on over my years as a council member to make sure that we're continuing to maintain and if we can, grow the grant funding that's available. And as we talk about looking at things through an equity lens, I think the real true mark of a city and a community is how it treats those within its borders who are most in need. The mayor says this often, I agree, that we are unique among municipalities and local governments of our size in the DC region in the way that we invest in this process, because we do care so much about making sure that we can provide whatever support we can, limited though it may be, for those in our community who are in need. But I'm particularly encouraged to see how many folks have been taking advantage of the Financial Wellness Coalition opportunities. We celebrated the 10-year anniversary from when we founded the Bank on Gaithersburg program just recently, and so that's really great. We often talk about it's important, to give someone a fish when they're in an emergency and they need help, but it's even more important to teach them how to fish. And these financial wellness programs, as well as vocational training and many of the other programs that we have through our grants, are really trying to do that. Before I joined the City Council, I was on the Educational Enrichment Committee, and we went through our own grant process, which I'm sure we're about to hear about. So I have some familiarity with that grant review process, and it is yeoman's work. And particularly given that you have a smaller committee roster these days, I just want to personally thank you for going through that work. I know how tough it can be, particularly when you have limited dollars and you're trying to allocate them as equitably as you can. And there are many, many good causes out there. But I'm excited about the new focus areas, and I'm glad to see that you're sort of thinking about how we expand strategically to meet those concerns, and how we think about demographics, and how we work that into the way that we administer our grants so that we can collect data, because we want to be data-driven in making these decisions going forward. And I was really glad to hear Maureen mention the census. I know your shop has been doing a ton of work with the census. You've even loaned out staff to the Maryland Municipal League and state committees and county committees. And we all know here in Gaithersburg how important that is, because the federal funding and resources and state funding and resources that we will be able to access will rely on getting an accurate count. And many of the folks who are considered to be the most vulnerable to being undercounted are also the folks who are going to be serving with a lot of these needs-based services. And so I'm glad to see that we're sort of integrating our census outreach efforts with the work of this committee and the work of community services. I do want to say, while I think it is very important for us to acknowledge and celebrate and appreciate the work of our staff and our committee, I suspect that while it's always nice to get together and thank you for your work, that you'd rather have a little more money in the grant pool than a bar tab. So if it were up to me, I'd want to make sure that you have a little bit more money as well, as a way to appreciate the work that you do and more people that you might be able to help. So thank you again for all the work that you do.
Thank you. I want to echo the remarks of my more eloquent colleagues here on this. I think what we're seeing now, what I'm seeing is about 10 years ago, we kind of reorganized how we did the grants, and we switched to contracts. I think we're seeing how that has worked and is working. So I'm glad that that's happening. The other thing that we did a few years ago, when all the other local governments were cutting back because of the recession and budget, we actually, as a group, intentionally increased our commitment to these efforts and increased the budget in this area. So I think a lot of what your committee does, and you do it so well, and it's we can't thank you enough for that, your dedication to this, you and your colleagues on the committee, and then previous committees members as well, is the reason why a lot of us got into local government, decided to do what we do. But as Lorianne identified, the nonprofit partners of the city are the fourth part of our government, and I think that's very important. So, and then, even when we increased the budget a few years ago, when everybody else was doing poorly and making cuts here, we had a couple of county council members that specifically called us out for that goal and objective in terms of how we were able to do that, and pointed out that why Gaithersburg is such a quality place in terms of identifying and taking care of the most vulnerable in our population. So to get back to the idea of the racial equity lens, I think perhaps an annual meeting or occasional get-together with the Community and Economic Development Committee might benefit in terms of, as I mentioned during their presentation, and I think bringing that equity lens to economic development is pretty important. And so this might be a way to do that, and perhaps also recruit some people from that committee, or perhaps identify some other parts of their network of people that would be interested in doing this. I think, part of our problem is the people we would recruit are also already involved in some of these nonprofits, so it creates kind of a conflict of interest. So we have to be careful of that. But I think there are plenty of people in the community that have the skills and knowledge that might be willing to be involved. And I know you've reached out quite a bit, and we should continue to reach out. All of us will do that on social media and otherwise, other ways with our networks to do that. So I like your focus areas, these new focus areas. I think the most important thing when we're talking about individuals with disabilities, seniors, and those with addictions is they tend to be the most vulnerable, but they also, the independence in their lives is pretty important. So anything we can do to make sure that people in those circumstances retain some level of independence is important. And then immigration and naturalization, certainly we have large segments of the community, as you've identified in your data. So, and the last thing, I think, I don't remember who it was that said that, but I think we have to promote what the accomplishments that we've had in this area, point out that the areas of where we still have great needs, and the opportunities for additional partnerships to help us address some of these things too. But to be able to explain the number of people that we provide services to, how we've managed to connect these networks of partners to offer the various things that people need is pretty important, and I think might actually encourage more engagement and involvement with the rest of the community. And I think people appreciate, I think our residents for the most part know that we do this, and I think they want to hear about it a little more. They don't, this is one of the things that I think most people who live here are happy that the city does, and so we have to let them know what we're doing.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
All right, I will open it up to anybody in the audience who'd like to speak on this topic. Britta.
I do want to say just one thing quickly, and I had actually...
State your name for the record.
Britta Monaco.
I'm just kidding.
Director of the Department of Community and Public Relations, for those who don't quite get it right all the time. And that's sometimes my own staff. I had passed a note to Barbara, and it occurred to me when we were hearing from the Environmental Affairs Committee, and I'm glad that Deb is still here, when you were talking about cross-committee collaborations, and we were talking about the idea of potentially a composting educational seminar for restaurants, that in that same breath, we could do a seminar for them about food reclamation and what we can do through our nutrition grants and programs. So those are kinds of examples of how we need to continue to stay in touch with each other and what we're doing. So I just wanted to get that thought in Deb's mind while I'm...
Oh,
Great.
Britta, I wanted to ask, I know we send out that quarterly magazine every year.
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
Comes out in spring and fall.
Oh, okay. I thought it was more than that. Okay. Is there a way we can dedicate a page for recruiting for our committees?
We can certainly advertise that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's our own magazine. We can advertise what we want.
Since it goes to everyone.
What we try to do in that magazine, it's 6 feature articles that we're trying to get people to get a different look at their government and what local government does. And we try to weave committees in through that. It's a little bit more subliminal, I guess. But for example, the Muddy Branch Trail was a feature in the last article, and it was talking about the Environmental Affairs Committee and the work of that group. So we try to make sure that the committees are woven through the story and the subject matter, but we can be more blunt.
Yeah, I think.
Like a direct call to action.
Yeah.
Situation.
A whole page dedicated.
A big recruitment month or something.
We have done
First
feature articles on
magazines.
being an advisory committee member as well.
I remember the feature article we did about the data walk that we did at
Yeah.
Miena with all the committees that are served the nonprofits. So
Yep.
I think people are digesting it, but I don't think they realize that only 4 people are doing all of that work through that data walk. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Britta. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So next, we're going to move on to Educational Enrichment Committee and invite Stacy Simon to the table.
We didn't know how we wouldn't merge or not.
That right?
That we would not merge.
Oh, I'll mention it at the end, or at the beginning.
Okay. You find the right one?
So formal. Stacy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think Barbara's presentation is a tough act to follow, but I'll try to do my best. Seriously. On behalf of the Educational Enrichment Committee, I'd like to share some information with you. In January, we adopted our new mission statement. It reads, we are focusing on collaborating with families, educators, nonprofits, businesses, and other stakeholders to encourage and support creative, impactful, inclusive, and rewarding programs that enrich educational opportunities within our community. We have further identified 8 work plan elements, and they include funding and facilitation, legislation and advocacy, communication with schools, parents, community, city staff, and nonprofit partners, equity and inclusion, literacy and language promotion, cradle to career, parental involvement and early childhood development, addiction in youth, and youth mental health, including reunification and trauma. So we have a pretty full plate of things that we're working on. So before I continue, I would like to acknowledge Jason Wilcox. He is also a member of the Educational Enrichment Committee, and he's here with us this evening too. And Jason, there is a third seat if you'd like to join us. In addition to Jason, we have Ellie Eldridge, Mark Ezrin, Beth Kennington, Jim Simpson, Ghislaine Taseko, Lorraine Thomas, Jason Wilcox, and Mother Teresa Wright. And of course, we couldn't do any of the work that we do without the fabulous community services staff, including Maureen and Lauren and Tawana and Carla and Britta. And so we thank, on behalf of the committee, we thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
To qualify, so what we've done is we've created, we know you like statistics, and so we've created some slides that provide you with statistics. So this first slide that you see is, we wanted to give you an idea of how families qualify for FARMS. FARMS is the free and reduced meals. And a family of 4 cannot have an annual income higher than $46,435. And then what we did was we broke it down for you based on the elementary schools in our cluster within the city. So in Gaithersburg, as you can see, 85% of the students are FARMS. Summit Hall, which breaks down to 719 families. Summit Hall, 80%, breaks down to 534 families. Brown Station, 61%, breaks down to 352 families. Watkins Mill, 71%, 492 families. And Diamond Elementary, 7% with 54 families. So there are a significant number of families in the city of Gaithersburg who are who've fallen into that FARMS category.
We have the full list if you ever want it. This is just a sampling.
Just a sample.
We didn't include, Rosemont. There's more. So this was just good.
Washington.
We can send you the full list.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, sorry. No, I switched my pages around. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
No.
Yep.
The committee has identified 9 priorities that we have and 9 priorities that we have and would like to continue focusing on, right? And these 9 priorities are after-school academic achievement, social and emotional support, parental engagement, career and vocational programming, STEAM, leadership development and mentoring, early childhood development, equity and inclusion, and language and literacy. And then what we did is, based on the current year, right, we identified the number of students, well, first of all, the total award that we gave through our grants. So we, just like Barbara's committee, we also have a grant program for schools and nonprofit school and youth mental health grants. Those are the grants that we are in charge of. And so as you can see, the total award was $357,670. And we touched the lives of 2,931 students in the city of Gaithersburg. We broke that down again, as I said, into the 9 categories, and then you can see next to each of the categories how many students were impacted or who benefited from the money over the past year. So, Rob, you'd be happy to see that number 5, where the STEAM program, we have touched the lives of over 1,000 students.
We hope to touch more.
At the other end, one that's near and dear to my heart is the early childhood development. And as you can see, we currently have touched the lives of 10 students. So clearly that's an area where we need to either possibly receive additional funding to help that category, or we are actually also have been in communication with MCPS under that topic as well.
And just to add one thing, like Stacy said, the present grants that we are giving out and the FY19 grants, we assign to these categories. That's how we came up with the numbers. These categories took probably the last year or two in development, both through needs assessments, the input from our youth providers, looking at this at a big retreat the Education Enrichment Committee went on to come up with the priorities, and we plan to use these priorities going forward. So when we have our required grant training at the beginning of December, all the schools and nonprofits will get this list. So that we have some consistency and hopefully keep this for a while, just unless something major changes, to see how well we're hitting these priority areas.
So if you take the $357,670 and divide it by 2931, it basically came out to $122 per child, per student. All right? Okay. So our next slide, so again, for the fiscal year 20, the funding of $357,680 to 13 Gaithersburg area schools and nonprofits to support 45 programs in the same priority areas as fiscal year 19. That's our goal, right?
That's what we're working on now.
That's what we're currently working on now. The demographic breakdown of the city's students served through the nonprofit school grants now are requiring quarterly reporting, so that's a change for us. And we will be having our required grant training schedule, our required grant training on December 3rd. All right.
So the 13 are all, we're still working with 10% schools,
Yes.
right? At least 10% of the enrollment is
At least 10%, or if you remember last year, you approved the addition of 150 students, so that brought on like Watkins Mill High School and Northwest High School.
Okay.
Because we added that little clause.
We will also be serving or focusing on to continuing active participation and coordination with Youth Opportunities Coalition and Youth Services Division, to continue encouragement of the mayor and city council member attendance at school and committee events and activities, participate in school open houses, formalize collaborations with the Board of Education and the Montgomery County Parent-Teacher Association. We hope to attend cluster meetings and to explore ways to foster communication with the city's elected officials. We identified a few areas, priority areas, and areas that we want to continue to work on. Literacy and language, early childhood development, promotion of equity and inclusion, and parental involvement. So although we have touched on those in the past, we feel that those are some key areas that we really feel like we need to focus on moving forward. And of course, researching options for increased support in these critical areas through additional funding and business and partnership development. So what's happening now? This year, or currently, we have a new GREAT program. Did we bring the?
Yeah.
And Maureen brought our new GREAT brochures.
We can give it to them afterwards,
Right.
but
and a new collaboration with MLK Day of Service. We are planning on doing a full inventory of school-based programs. We need a defibrillator at the Boris Parent Resource Center. We are hoping to start a new school and partnership section in the Community Services newsletter, continue talks with MCPS to promote expansion of nonprofit partners programming. And then one of the areas that we are also going to continue to work on, going back to the MCPS, and also we have been approached by MCPS to work with them in focusing on the MCPS's early childhood expansion plans. So they have reached out to our committee to help with that as well.
Can I add one more thing about GREAT? Many of you probably already know about GREAT, Gaithersburg recognizing educational achievement today. Well, we changed it to educators. So it's all about shouting out and recognizing our educators in our schools. So how that's going to be coupled with MLK Day is Seneca Creek Church always does a special craft to recognize teachers. So it's actually going to become the GREAT Teacher Recognition Project at the MLK Day of Service. So it's a nice partnership we're going to do, but we're really looking for folks and teachers and parents to send in their submissions for educators and school staff that they'd like to be recognized. And that's the focus of our GREAT program for this year.
And then as we move forward, we also want to continue to consult with Montgomery County Council Member Craig Rice, with MCPS Title I office, with the Union Community Liaison. So Oscar is going to be coming and speaking to our group. We're going to be having somebody from the Kerwin Commission come. And we also have, in our December meeting, we have some representatives from MCPS and the STEM program, correct, Robert? Right? The December meeting, the people that are coming.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just making sure that they were MCPS people.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's all right. So that's it. And we thank you for your interest and support of our schools, our families, and most importantly, our students.
And I just want to point out real quickly, if you see the last slide, that was taken at the second session of the Extreme Finance event that's being sponsored by Bank on Gaithersburg. We're extremely proud of these city students that are participating in this educational event, and just love that picture, so we had to put that in there.
I love that picture too. I saw it when you guys originally posted it on Twitter, and immediately retweeted it. It's a testament to the success of that young program, and it's wonderful.
Right.
Stacy, thank you very much. Maureen, thank you for your support. Jason, thank you, and the rest of the members of the committee. This like the community advisory committee provides invaluable service to the mayor and council in identifying needs and suggesting ways to allocate resources, which is a difficult task. And you guys do an excellent job at it. We really appreciate it. Who would like to start with questions, comments? Lorianne, definitely. I see her just chomping at the bit.
Well, thank you, Mayor. This is one of my favorite committees. It was the first committee that I joined when I moved to the city of Gaithersburg. It's important that we support educating our most vulnerable residents. I love the Cradle to Career initiative model. I think it's something that distinguishes us again from other entities across the state. I tout it everywhere I go. I think it's an excellent initiative because from Cradle to Career, we want to make sure that we are supportive of our residents, and I think through these programs and the new initiatives, the 9 focus areas, I think it's very clear that that's what we're doing through parent engagement, early childhood education, language and literacy. We're helping every aspect of our community. And I'm glad you mentioned the breakdown of the $122 per student that we are assisting. And, I mean, I would be supportive of increasing this to at least 150 per student if we can find a way to allocate additional funding. I think with the impact that we're making, I know Rob mentioned through the STEAM program, he asked for allocation of additional funding, and it looks like that's where the greatest, needs are. We are the biotech corridor, and we want to make sure that we are also equipping our residents with the support that they need if that's the direction they want to go in. So I think that's important. I know you mentioned the demographic breakdown that you're going to be including quarterly, but it wasn't in here. Have you started collecting?
We got our first report. Well, the first reports that come in, the mid-years come January 15th.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm going to take a look at both the community service grants and these and see how the demographics look. I wanted to give it 2 quarters.
Okay.
Just glancing
See
at them,
trends.
it seems pretty comprehensive. Some of the
Okay.
service areas seem slanted to, one group of folks versus another, which is interesting. It'll take some analysis and look at this to make sure we're hitting all the communities.
Okay.
But we'll update after that second one. I didn't want to do it on just the first.
The first, good.
quarter.
Okay, but at least we'll have some good baseline
Yeah,
data
we
to
will.
work from. And I know we've been talking about collaborations all night. I think, I'm suggesting that, we allocate more money, but we have partners who are always looking for things to donate to, issues to support. And I think working with Tom and members of the CED committee, our chamber, it would be helpful to let them know how much we're spending, what the impact is, and how they can also contribute to all this great work that we're doing. So just another suggestion. Thank you for your great work, all of you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rob?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stacy Maureen, for the presentation. Maureen, thank you for 2 presentations in a row.
Lean forward a little bit. I mean, just so we can hear you on the mic.
Now, when leaning forward, I'm now choking on a bunch of crunch. Sorry, I was actually reading the slide when you're talking. That's when I refocused my attention. But I really appreciate you guys putting up with me. Especially Jason, he's come to 2 of my meetings with MCPS to talk about the ways that we can foster more STEM program and STEM collaboration with MCPS, which leads us to the December 13th meeting, in which the 2 folks who are in charge of STEM education for Montgomery County are going to be collaborating with us, trying to work out ideas on how we can work with each other to improve kind of the holistic way of educating our students, both curricular and extracurricularly, in that area. And so this kind of deep dive I've been getting into what the EEC is doing has really given me an appreciation for all the hard work you do. So I just wanted to say thank you for 1, all the hard work you do, and 2, sort of tolerating me in your fold for a little while. But thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike?
Well, as another former liaison to the committee and member, I love the work of the committee, and I know how hard you work. It's nice to see the continuity on the committee. Some of the members I worked with when I was first the liaison, and then we have some new energy as well. So that's a lot of grants to review. I think the grant portal, the application portal, is really a big addition. Every one of us would want to put more money into a lot of different things. We've heard a lot of that tonight. Certainly, we have to decide on what our priorities are. I think the more children we touch, whether they're pre-K or high school, or even bridging to college, whether it's community college or 4-year college, I think it's important to hit as many as we can. That's what I'm most interested in, is those efforts. And there are a lot of things that I feel that MCPS is responsible for, making sure that our students have. We've been able to supplement that, in particular in terms of supplementing the needs of the most vulnerable communities and populations within the city, and I want to continue to do that. but I like the direction that and the priorities of the committee. I think they continue to develop and evolve. So our collaboration with MCPS is very important. We've always been a good partner with them. They've always been pretty good partners with us. We're going to see real soon how much of a partner they want to be on certain things. So, but thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as an alumnus of this committee, I basically want to echo everything I said about the CAC to this committee as well. I think the two of you kind of work in tandem in addressing these important issues among communities within our city. And I want to kind of salute two things in particular. First, the way that you're doing a really great job at reimagining the ways that you engage with communities and engage with those that the committee serves. The idea of sort of tweaking the GREAT program so that it's really just focusing on educators. Certainly the program, the Bank on Gaithersburg program for the kids that the mayor and I were able to be there for the kickoff event. I think, Lorianne, you may have been there as well for the kickoff event at the youth center. You know, the creativity that you're bringing to engaging the community in new ways is really impressive, considering, you know, in general, we're all sort of doing the same big things over and over again and some of the same small administrative things over and over again each year. So it takes a real sense of purpose for the mission of the committee to really go and look at ways that you can do things in new and different ways. So I salute that. And I'm also really impressed with the way that you engage partners. When you look at the presentation and you look at the work that you all have done as a committee over this year and in past years, that you're constantly reaching out to engage members of the county council, MCEA, the PTAs, even the teachers unions, anybody who can be a stakeholder partner in these efforts, so that we really have a village of folks who know different angles of problems and different angles of where we can get resources to try to help solve some of those problems. That is awesome. Again, you know, we do this work year in and year out. Sometimes we are at risk of getting siloed. And I'm just so impressed with the way both the committee and staff are always thinking about ways to make new partnerships. So thanks for everything you do. This work is so important, and I'm just very appreciative.
Thank you.
All right, I will open it up if there's anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this topic. Going once, going twice. Okay, not seeing anybody. Thank you guys once again for the presentation and for all you do, and please pass on our thanks to the rest of the committee.
Sure, thank you.
And I just wanted to say, you probably heard both committees have met a couple times because there was the idea of possibly looking at merging. But we're really happy that they are staying as two different committees because there's big focus on specific areas. However, they are going to intentionally be meeting at least twice a year to look at common community service, you know, themes and priorities. So we're going to hopefully do that with other committees too. So
good,
great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So that is the last item on our agenda. I will note that we meet next week. Regular meeting of the Mayor and Council is Monday, December 2nd. This Friday, Winter Lights begins. Although, for those of you who have dogs, there is the Leashes and Lights event, which is tomorrow night, and I'm assuming there's still some tickets left to that, which is where you can actually walk your dog through the park. It's really a lot of fun, and Santa's there. We'll take pictures with your dog. You could be in the picture too. It doesn't just have to be, just so you know. On Sunday, I will remind everybody we have a really great Gaithersburg Book Festival event. We're bringing in legendary author and illustrator Jan Brett at 5 p.m. on Sunday at the Johns Hopkins University Montgomery County campus, the Gilchrist Hall. It's free to attend. We expect that there's going to be a lot of people there, so you're well advised to get there early. Details on the website, gaithersburgbookfestival.org. And we all wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.